Can you give just some clarity exactly how NIL actually works? I think that kind of the original conversation came from Reggie Bush and him, not being paid for his success, but also from players like selling their clothes and selling the things that they got from the university and then getting in trouble for it, which prompted a lot of the conversation that led to how we have it now. So can you kind of give just like a background and understanding of what NIL is and how exactly it works?
At a lot of schools, there's two sports that are profitable, right? And we know what those are. Football, if it's FBS football, and then men's basketball. At some schools, there's some other sports that turn a profit, but those two, by and large, without them, you probably wouldn't have the other varsity sports. So, we really would only come along on the back end. So, when the collective was still, issuing payments to student athletes, we would construct a contract. We'd slot in the dollar amount and the expectations, right, of what they had to do in the community, and so we weren't, really out negotiating with the student athletes or their parents.
All right. You ready?
Right, so yeah, just look at you. We'll just roll.
Yes, sir. All right. Welcome back, everybody, to the FBA podcast hosted right here at 16 Tech Innovation Center in the beautiful city of Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm your host. My name is Byron Jesu Hubbard II. And today we have another very, very special guest who I'm honored to have. He is a true leader in the intersection of sports, business, and community. He is currently the president, CEO, and CEO of the Boilermaker Alliance, Purdue's exclusive NIL fund. But he also has history working with the Pacers. He has history working with Salesforce, but he is also a Ball State graduate. But I think he's really a Boilermaker at heart. But I'm proud and honored to have Dave Neff on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here, man.
It's an honor to be on, Byron. You know something about being at a couple schools, right?
Yeah.
Purdue and Butler.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But did I miss anything else? I know that you're also a father. You're also a husband.
Yeah.
And I think those things count a lot more in the way that you run your business, in the way that you operate as a businessman, and as you operate in the community. So.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on. So, I've been married for 11 years, my wife Joelle, and then we have 4 young children, 9 down to 3 every other year, 3 boys and a girl. And so absolutely they're priority in my life, and as well as, my personal faith just undergirds everything I do. And so none of us are perfect. We all are flawed and make mistakes, but there's grace. And so, excited to be on and chat through kind of everything that you've got going with FBA.
Yeah, for sure. No, I appreciate you being on, man. And of course, me being a college football product, you being the head of the Purdue NIL fund, tons of questions, tons and tons of questions, especially as we approach the college football season. But just kind of give me a quick rundown of your history, because you graduated from Ball State, but now you're like leading Purdue in a lot of different ways. So just kind of give us a walkthrough of your entrepreneurial journey.
Well, yeah, don't give me too much credit. I've just been last couple years been running Purdue's collective, NIL collective, and so legally the collective had to sit outside the university, right? So we are totally separate from the athletic department. That was the rules, and so, but in a lot of ways we were an extension of the team, right? We worked very closely with the athletic department on a number of initiatives. Obviously, our job was to raise capital to then turn around and put student athletes on contract, and in return they would go out into the community and do a lot of good works with the Boys and Girls Club, University Blood Bank, reading at elementary schools. And so, so playing a small role in this new college athletics environment, and it's been a ton of fun. I worked with probably about 150 different student athletes. Everyone talks about football and men's basketball, but women's basketball, women's volleyball, tennis, golf, a few other sports. So it's been a great ride going to the Final Four, a little over a year ago with the men's basketball program, and then the work we did to retain, the core of our roster going in this next season, which will be pretty exciting. Final Four is in Indy in 2026.
It is, yeah.
I think this team that Matt Painter's constructed has a lot of potential. So we'll see. And then we got a new football coach at Purdue, Barry Odom, which is exciting. He's going to be almost an entirely new roster when they kick off here, and when we're recording this, about a month or so from today. So versus Ball State. So
it is versus Ball State. Yeah, and
so,
like that staff is from Butler.
Yeah.
So they went from Butler to Ball State. That's so funny, the connections. Also, I don't know if you noticed, but like got the yellow and the gold for Purdue, red for Butler. You feel me? I do my research.
Yeah.
But I wanted to touch on a few things. One, I really admire your journey, just from what you made, and you took advantage of the opportunities that were in front of you. But before we get into some of the things we talked about before I started recording, can you give just some clarity exactly how NIL actually works? I think that kind of the original conversation came from Reggie Bush and him, not being paid for his success, but also from players like selling their clothes and selling the things that they got from the university and then getting in trouble for it, which prompted a lot of the conversation that led to how we have it now. So can you kind of give just like a background and understanding of what NIL is and how exactly it works?
Yeah, I could do my best. So NIL stands for name, image, and likeness. And even maybe before Reggie Bush, there was a guy, men's basketball player at UCLA named Ed O'Bannon, who probably jump-started this process with a lawsuit over, hey, UCLA is using my name in video games and jersey sales, and I'm not seeing a penny of that, right? And so in July of 2021, there was a NCAA allowed sort of passed some NIL legislation essentially saying that, hey, student athletes can now profit off of their name, image, and likeness, their personal brands.
Yep.
So that was 4 years ago. And, I think a couple of things came together that maybe a lot of people didn't anticipate, but the ability for players to, make money off of their NIL, as well as the transfer portal. And the last couple of years, everyone talks about it, but it's kind of become open season now that student athletes can essentially transfer as frequently as they'd like, every semester, and we've seen that in a number of instances. But I think in a lot of ways, like there's some good things, but there's also been some collateral damage, right?
Sure.
You got young men and women probably aren't being rooted and staying at a place for 3, 4 years, 5 years anymore. When there's the first sort of bit of adversity, maybe they look to transfer, and that's probably not a great long-term life lesson, right, of sticking with it and dealing with hard stuff and making it through to the other end. But, in the last month or so, Byron, it's all sort of shifting. The courts ruled in June of 25. They approved the House settlement, House versus the NCAA, and so that created a framework where starting in July of 2025, student athletes can now share in up to $20.5 million per school if the school if the school chooses to opt in to the settlement, which most Power 4 schools are, including Purdue at the Big Ten. And so that $20.5 million, it's really up to the athletic director, Mike Babinski, how that gets divvied up. And so in terms of what does the world look like for collectives, what I've been leading the last 2 years, it's sort of across the board. We actually just announced earlier this month, we're going to be sunsetting, winding down operations for Boilermaker Alliance.
Wow.
No longer raising donations, and we debated, do we keep a third party or not? But I think there's a lot of work that can be done in house now with the settlement, and then you've got groups like Learfield that are already in kind of the corporate space, and so you're kind of seeing every school respond a little bit differently to it. But super proud of what we've done, and I'm hanging around kind of next several months just helping with some transition items. But it's a new day for sure in college athletics, where student athletes can now share and to the tune of $20.5 million, and that number will probably only go up from here on out every year.
Yeah. So one, I wanted to go back to something you said. One, I appreciate the breakdown, because even having existed in the college football environment for me, really the past almost 10 years, because I had transferred from Purdue to Butler before the NIL thing like really took off. To be honest, if I had, probably when they got picked up by Butler, but I was fortunate enough to do it before then. And just the past few years have been madness, like with the combination of the NIL settlement, but also the combination of the transfer portal, like you mentioned. And I agree with you. And I think this is where I struggle as well, because I transferred. I transferred because my experience wasn't what I had expected, but it also just wasn't the best situation for me, which I think situations like that do exist. But I was still there for like 4 years prior to me making that decision. Like I still learned so many things that actually really came to fruition when I transitioned into being a coach, so that everything I learned like at a Big Ten level, I could then teach these kids at the FCS level. So I go back and forth between like, yes, these players deserve to get paid because college football is a billion-dollar industry. Like I think it's an inherently good thing that you have. Now, this is just college football, but all the college sports, you have a team or a collection of individuals that are fighting for something. Yeah. And I think that ultimately is a good thing, but it brings in money. It brings in money that allows for profitability for bigger organizations. And it really just isn't fair that these kids don't see any of that money. Yeah. Now, my honest argument against NIL was that these kids are getting their schools paid for. And now times are different than they were. Say, for example, like my coach that I had on earlier in an episode, but who we talked about earlier, they did not have near as many resources, and he went to the University of Tennessee. Yeah. So, like, you cut NIL out the picture. Like, you're still getting your school paid for. You're still getting all the meals that you could literally choke on the things that they're giving you. Yeah. Now, that's at these bigger schools. Now, I think the conversation really begins to persist at schools that aren't Power 4, where, like, sure, you're getting your school paid for, but I had a friend who transferred from the University of Purdue to a different school, and yeah, he was getting school paid for, but like not for his books, not for his meals, and really barely even his housing. So I really want to say the NIL discussion exists more for divisions and teams under the Power 4 that don't have as many resources. But I really want to get your opinion just kind of on how did we get here to where like the conversation needed to be had of the model of revenue sharing, because the past 4 years have undoubtedly been insane, and you have been kind of in that world the entire time. So kind of walk me through like when you entered, the mindset that goes into honestly valuation of you get a transfer or you get a 5-star freshman that comes in, of paying them this amount of money.
Yeah, good question. I would say in my role running the collective, again, I can't speak on behalf of the athletic department. A lot of the evaluation work is done by the coaching staffs, and on our football team we have a general manager now, great guy, Brandon Lee, who's a product of Lawrence Central High School, and then played at Mizzou under Barry Odom when he was the coach at Mizzou. Now is Purdue's coach, and so we really would only come along on the back end. So when the collective was still, issuing payments to student athletes, we would construct a contract. We'd slot in the dollar amount and the expectations, right, of what they had to do in the community, and so we weren't, really out negotiating with the student athletes or their parents. We really kind of deferred, and the coaches and the staff drove that, and then we would get involved, on the back end, and so and then obviously a lot of our job was raising capital from donors and some corporate deals, and then we had a membership program, and so we would, wasn't a hard salary cap, but the money wasn't limitless either, right? So we kind of had to coordinate with each sport to say, hey, here's X amount of dollars that we can allocate to this year's roster, right? And then if they came back like, hey, we could really use X, well, we could go try to raise it, right? No guarantees, but
so kind of like a bank or like like you go to get a loan from the bank or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it was, hence the name collective. You're kind of pooling resources, right, from alumni, from donors, from fans. And so, super proud of what we were able to do in a relatively short amount of time. I mean, taking it, we could talk about this. I started my career in sports at Pacers Sports and Entertainment almost 20 years ago. And so I sort of saw this as a high risk, high reward, situation, right? I mean, the chance to, when I got contacted about the opportunity to go learn NIL, as you said, still kind of on the ground floor, kind of knowing it might be a 2-year sprint, just given kind of the way the winds were blowing with this House vs. NCAA case and a few other antitrust cases. But I was like, hey, at the very least, I'm going to get in with a Big Ten school, a brand that I super admire and respect, in Purdue, and get to know a lot of the alumni, donors, board of trustees, people just in that in that orbit, and obviously Purdue's an incredible institution here in the state of Indiana. My wife and I, we live in Indianapolis, and so it was a remote role, and so I'd get up there once or twice a week. But I figured the way my career has gone, Byron, it's like you kind of take the next thing that comes before you, and you're thinking long term, like, okay, what could this lead to? But you don't always know what's behind sort of that next door. And so, while this will be a shorter run in terms of a couple years, I'm excited for the future for Purdue athletics. They do things the right way up there, and just a ton of great folks and leadership, both in coaching as well as athletic administration, the trustees, Purdue for Life Foundation, just everyone I've gotten the chance to interact with.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I both can resonate on the impact that Purdue has on you just by association.
Yeah.
Purdue, my degree has gotten me everywhere I wanted to go. Every opportunity that I've wanted, I've gotten, but also moved me in a way to think that I can do things, like this.
Yeah.
So no, I 100% share the sentiment of gratitude and love for Purdue till I die. But I also wanted to get into something you mentioned earlier of when you have the collective, you go out there and raise money. That screams like startup for me, right? So you go out there, you do a different rounds of funding for Purdue alumni, different organizations, yada, yada, whatever. What goes into the process behind you guys as the collective setting aside certain amounts of money for each sport? Because again, like my mind's always going to go to college football, but also because they have the biggest teams. And I think this is probably shifting a little bit, but in terms of like you bring in a high-profile transfer quarterback, you're going to want a good amount of money set aside for him. Now, the model is shifting to something different, but what kind of went into how you guys decided how much money was set aside for each sport?
Yeah. Well, in the early days, for sure. I mean, there's really, at a lot of schools, there's two sports that are profitable, right? And we know what those are. Football, if it's FBS football, and then men's basketball. At some schools, there's some other sports that turn a profit, but those two, by and large, without them, you probably wouldn't have the other varsity sports. So they obviously got a lot of our attention, at Purdue running the Boilermaker Alliance, and then just the strength of our men's basketball program. I mean, I think more than likely they're going to be preseason number one this upcoming year, and so obviously that's a team that we really got to take care of and make sure they've got the resources they need. But another strong program at Purdue for a long time has been women's volleyball, led by Dave Shondell, who's been there a long time, over 20 years, and so they made it to the Sweet 16, and that was a program we had the fortune of working with and supporting, and raising funds for the entire roster. And so that's in collaboration with the athletic department, kind of how those decisions were made of where do we focus our energies, right, versus just trying to be all things to all people. I mean, I'd love to get equal amounts to all.
Love to give $100 million to everybody.
Yeah, 17, 18 varsity programs there, but it's just not possible. So
Yeah, and that makes sense. And just kind of with everything shifted, do you agree with the direction that things are going in terms of how things were with having to raise a collective and then turning around and divvying up that collective between the different sports? Do you agree with the direction that it's going in terms of like the revenue sharing model, which honestly I'm not really sure. Like I know exactly how it works. But do you think we're going in the right direction and how we're shifting?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think it makes sense for the university to be able to directly compensate, right? I mean, we were fortunate to have a pretty strong relationship with Purdue Athletic Department. Not all collectives had that, right? I mean, because collectives at some schools could go a little rogue or maybe just, it was new, right? And I get it, college athletic leaders were kind of maybe skeptical of, who are these groups, and oftentimes they were alumni, right? So there was kind of built-in trust, but still, it's a totally separate entity, right? And you got to build trust and have strong alignment, and because you're not maybe in those offices every day, right? So I think from a control standpoint, it makes sense for universities to be the ones directly compensating. I think it'll just be interesting to watch it play out now with this new clearinghouse. It's called NIL Go that Deloitte's managing, where they're essentially manage. Yeah, this is for any like endorsements or what we call true NIL. Where they're actually say you were on the football team and going out doing an appearance at a company or a coffee shop, and you would essentially have to submit that deal if it was above $600. Say a coffee shop wanted to pay you $1,000, right? They would, there's this portal now where you would upload that deal. It'd have to get approved, right? They give you a range of compensation, and it's all tied to fair market value. So sort of your profile, your influence, right? Your NIL, your personal brand, maybe your reach on social media, if it's in West Lafayette, the sport you play, like all these different factors would kind of generate, here's a range of compensation, right? And part of that is to, I think, rein in, boosters, maybe just saying, here's $100,000 and you don't have to do anything for it, or it's one appearance. And maybe there's some student athletes out there that would command that, right? But so that's all new as of July 2025. This clearinghouse that Deloitte's managing.
Interesting.
Again, that's separate from the 20.5 that the university can pay. And then there's a whole new enforcement entity called the College Sports Commission, CSC, that is in charge of all Division I enforcement. So that used to be under, the NCAA's purview, and now it's under the CSC's purview. So it'll just be interesting to kind of watch all of that play out. There's no collective bargaining agreement, right, in college athletics in the way that many pro leagues have a CBA.
Really?
And so some people speculate like maybe it's headed that way, right? But so I, do I agree with it? I think it's a stride in the right direction. I think probably at some point there'll probably need to be some. You still have a patchwork of all these different state laws, so it probably needs to have more like a federal sort of codified approach to NIL. That way, certain states aren't just creating new laws to circumvent whatever the new rules are.
You touched on kind of how it's moving to this new direction. You said it's called NIL Go, and Deloitte's running it?
Yeah, that's just the clearinghouse that is new as part of the House settlement. That just started in July, where essentially any new, this again sits outside of revenue sharing, the $20.5 billion. But yeah, any new endorsement or commercial opportunities that student athletes might be approached about by a company, a nonprofit, if it's above $600, it's supposed to be submitted into this clearinghouse for approval, and again, it'll kind of generate a range of compensation. So, this is all new in the last month or so, and I think it's been some articles written about it. You could go read up on if you wanted to, but yeah, it's just part of the evolving landscape.
Interesting. So if I have this correct, there's going to be a baseline revenue sharing model for each institution, which is going to be up to them. And like you mentioned, the Purdue NIL Alliance, for example, is going to be kind of moved more in-house, in a sense is being moved in-house.
I'd say that a lot of the roles and responsibilities are, but the entity itself, we're sunsetting operations, right? So we only had a couple staff anyways, but a lot of what maybe the collective was doing, whether it was fundraising or sourcing partnerships with charities or NIL endorsement opportunities, will be done by the athletic department. Yeah. Okay,
so you're gonna have this base salary, and then you have the NIL Go, like you mentioned, to where it's if you have any other endorsement opportunities above 600, it's going to be submitted for approval, but also provide more opportunities for student athletes to get more endorsements after that.
Correct. Yeah, the 20.5 is sort of table stakes, and that's coming straight from the university. And then depending on the school and sort of their proactivity, in their specific market, whether it's Purdue and West Lafayette, or doesn't necessarily have to just be West Lafayette, right? It could be companies in Indianapolis or Elkhart or Fort Wayne that want to engage with Purdue student athletes. Now there's just this process, right, that they have to go through, which is where NIL Go comes in. Yeah,
and I guess where I still have questions around, not for you, but just the concept of NIL and where it's moving today, of how, because I'm not sure I agree if this is better. Now, I will say what we had was outrageous, of kids coming in, and I was having this conversation the other day of last season showed a direct correlation between how much you spend on your players and how far you get into the playoffs or winning the championship. Ohio State spent the most on their players, won the national championship, right? And I was having these conversations from the beginning of, and now football in and of itself is special in this way, to where it's you can get the best players out of high school, but one of the first things that I learned when I stepped on Purdue's football field is that all that star stuff goes out the window as soon as you start. But in terms of paying the players and the inequalities that it creates, Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon, unlimited money, unlimited donations, unlimited money from alumni, to where it's them versus a group of 5 school. Now those teams can still win because again, my baseline is always going to be football. It's football. If you don't show up ready, it doesn't matter. But it was already showing itself last season, like the inequality that takes place when you can just pay your players really as much as you want. So I agree that it needs to be a lot more structured, Now, stringent is where I struggle because, again, like, even if you are having a more structured model of how you pay the players, all these other organizations are still making money from them. I'm not sure how much it is to have a commercial on an SEC Saturday and to slide one in there, but it's probably a whole lot of money that these kids aren't seeing. Yeah. So I'm glad that it's moving to like a more structured format. Yeah. Because, and again, this happened earlier this year before the House settlement of that Tennessee quarterback that was sitting out of spring ball, which is crazy, by the way, because he wanted a bigger contract. That's insane to me. But it's a consequence of just when you have like when money gets introduced into any industry or environment, you're going to have situations like this. So I'm glad that it's moving to like a more like structured setup, but I don't know. I don't know. What challenges do you think are still going to be persistent within this new format? Because I think some of the issues with the old one, last year, where there was really no restriction on like how much the collective could get, right? Like how much money you guys could raise, unless I'm wrong, and there were. Yeah. But also when you would get a high-profile transfer quarterback that's in the portal, it's a bidding war. You're auctioning for this guy. So what issues do you think are still going to be persistent in this new model that aren't necessarily solved by,
I don't know if I have a crystal ball. I think it'll be key just enforcement, right? Because some teams, some programs may go back to if they did it before paying guys under the table, right? Yeah. And so that was never sort of the way I know that Purdue did things. But I think enforcement. How does that get? What are the fines? What are the penalties? Because you do want to create somewhat of a level playing field, and that's obviously what the rev share component is designed to do. But if let's say there's a school that somehow is generating $10 million in additional NIL opportunities through the clearinghouse, and another school can only generate $500,000, right? That sort of is a disparity. And I think just watching all that play out with the clearinghouse and the new enforcement arm of College Sports Commission, some people argue that Title IX should apply to rev share. It doesn't currently, right? But
really?
Should male and female student athletes be compensated, the same or, equally? There's all sorts of questions I think will continue to get answered as we go through this next year. But no, all in all, I think the House settlement is a great step in the right direction. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier, kind of to what you just said about Title IX, you brought up that when you are deciding between which sports get how much money, it comes down to profitability, right? So what is not the argument, but how does profitability play a piece in how you divvy those funds? Again, this is the old model, but how did it play a part in how you decided which sports got a bigger part of the collective, and why was that not like a primary motivator to how much you gave, but why was that part of the discussion?
Yeah, again, it was all kind of a collaboration, Byron, between the collective and the athletic department. So I don't want to say it was solely our sort of decision, but I think you just kind of look at the economics of how the sports operate, right?
Yeah.
And given that it was so new and Title IX didn't apply to collectives, it's like, okay, like if we're going to be competitive and attract elite athletes, like specifically at Purdue, and I think probably every smart university does this, you still got to sell your intangibles, right?
Yep.
Like what you're going to leave with an elite public education, right? With a degree from Purdue, relationships still matter, culture still matters, chemistry, coaches that care about you and that are going to invest in you and push you, not just on the field or on the court, but in the classroom as well. Yep. So I think all those things still carry a lot of weight in college athletics. Everyone likes to talk about money and who can pay the most, just because that's sort of a sexy topic. But I think smart schools are thinking beyond that. So,
and I think you're 100% right. And I think what's dangerous, and we talked about this a little earlier, of the things that it invites when you have unrestricted amounts that you could pay these players, right? Because every team is going to sell you on like, we can make you better, we can do this for you, we can have a great education, yada yada. To where it's like, if everyone is saying the same thing, what are the tangible things that aren't the same? And for some of these kids, it's the check, right? If Purdue, Ohio State, IU, and Oregon are all offering me a great coaching experience, they're all offering me a great education, this, that, and the third. The only thing that, like, for them, it's going to come down to is like who's got more zeros or who's got more figures on the check. And I think that's what's dangerous about it. And we talked about it earlier. Like, before I transferred, I stayed 4 years, right? I wasn't making no money now. School paid for, yes. Food out the behind, yes. Yeah. But I'm not sure like how much like my decisions would have changed if I had the opportunity to go somewhere and buy my mom a house or to start investing in the market and set myself up with a family trust or something like that at the age of 19, 20, 21 or whatever. So I get that like it is a difficult thing to measure, especially like, and this too, like when you get people in your ear, it's like, oh, you should go here because they're offering you this, that, and the third. And I think it gets really dangerous. It does. And I kind of wanted to roll into away from like the official NIL discussion. But I wanted to get your viewpoint on the benefit of not transferring and the benefit of not being like, forget this, I'm going to go to a school that can pay me more money or set me up better. Like the trade-off, because it is a trade-off, right? If I stay here and I develop myself from a character perspective and sacrifice a bigger check somewhere else, like I want to hear kind of your opinion on the overarching benefits of that. Like, why should you stay?
I think it has broad application for a lot of things in life, right? Like a lot of challenges that we encounter in life. I think it's I've learned it's wisdom to sort of start by looking in the mirror, right? And now the natural, maybe human or flesh reaction is to point to a external factor or variable, right? And it's this person that's trying to undermine me, or this decision got made that was outside of my control, versus saying, okay, like I'm not, before I jump to any conclusions on that, let me look in the mirror and say, okay, maybe I did nothing wrong here and I just got dealt a bad hand. But I think it says a lot about someone's character when you can choose to respond with humility, with grace. What can I learn from this, right? Not make any knee-jerk reactions of, screw these guys, I'm going to transfer, or, just because, it feels good to be pursued, right? I think we've all,
100%.
whether it's in a relationship or a job interview, when someone's pursuing you, like that makes us feel good, right?
It does,
versus having to kind of chase someone else. And so I think, part of life, part of hopefully a lesson that these young student athletes can learn. And you're right, a lot of it is the people around them, and sometimes, unfortunately, these young people are I've seen it, are just pawns, and it doesn't really matter whether they come from affluence or from some pretty poor and poverty sort of type situations. I've seen both, where the young person's a pawn, right? You might have an affluent family that's all about the money, and they want their son or daughter to just get paid. It's like, well, you guys already have a ton of money. Why do you want more? Why is that such a big deal to you? And then I get this one a little bit more, but people that don't come from a lot, and hey, this could be some generational type changing wealth as a college undergrad, and but in that there's not always the greatest guidance or wisdom or advice, because it is just, hey, take the biggest bag of money and we'll transfer every year if we have to, just to make that happen, versus like staying rooted in a place and really building long-term relationships with a coaching staff and people who get to know you, and working through an injury or maybe getting benched for a period, and what's that going to teach you, versus just kind of moving on to the next thing because it feels good.
And that makes sense too. And kind of the discussions I've had around what NIL has brought as a consequence is, before that, and again, like, kids were getting paid, which isn't the best thing, but what you did have, and again, I'm always going to talk about football, is you had guys like fighting for 4 years to get to the next level for that life-changing money, for that life-changing opportunity, and the things that could change their parents or really their whole family's lives. Now that transition is a whole other set of people in your ear and responsibility and management that comes with that. But for 4 years, like, yeah, you were getting your school paid for, but you were still pursuing something. And for some of these kids that are coming in, especially like as 5-star athletes, now this is the old model, there was less incentive, honestly. Because I think, what comes with an industry like the NFL is money.
Yeah.
Like, money comes with it. Like,
Yeah.
the opportunity to get paid. Like, TJ Watt just signed, what was it, a 3-year, $123 million contract. It's like something crazy. Like, Micah Parsons about to get paid. Like, there was incentive for you to go through this, maybe at one institution, maybe at like 2, but to go through this for 4 years to get to the opportunity to make that kind of money. But now that you get it, as soon as you step in the door. Now, I've heard that, and I'm not sure if you can get clarity to this, but it's not like technically guaranteed. It is a set aside amount that they have for you if you achieve the things that we brought you on to do. But if they bring in a quarterback that they're expecting to start and he doesn't, they don't have to pay him, correct? Do you have any knowledge on that?
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, there's we issued contracts, and I can't speak to the revenue sharing contracts, what that looks like coming directly from the university, but every school on the collective side was a little bit different. We never issued multi-year contracts. Ours were always a year at a time, but we still paid people if they got hurt. The only way the contract would get broken would be like if they got kicked out of school or got a DUI or something like that that kind of breached from a behavioral standpoint. But and there might have been some collectives out there, certainly not at Boilermaker Alliance, where I heard some stories where they might stiff a player because they aren't playing as much as maybe they thought they would, but we never wanted to operate that way, just because that's not, as you know, how Purdue operates, and we were representing them in a lot of these situations. So
no, that makes sense. I had a colleague tell me at a different school that's the way they did it. What I didn't know is that like the way that you constructed your contract was up to the Alliance and up to the university. So the way you guys made your contracts was, say for example, and again, like if they transferred, would that also nullify the contract? 'Cause that is risky, because then you could just hop from school to school, sign a contract, and then just transfer again.
No, if they left, I mean, that was sort of, they knew what they were. They were going to forego what was remaining. If they left in one of the transfer portals, we wouldn't pay them out if they were going to another school. That was sort of understood in the contract. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I want to touch on something you brought up that I thought is super important to understand, is some of the character pieces that you develop in any sport by staying and sticking it out, whether through getting benched, developing a relationship with your coach, but also of recognizing things you could do better, is humility. So can you explain humility to me and kind of how it's helped you in your journey and how you've worked through different organizations and came up in your career?
I think one of the best definitions I've heard of humility is it's not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. And I'll say that a second time.
Yeah, say it again.
It's not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. And I think none of us are ever going to be fully arrived in terms of humility, but I think God has a way of using all sorts of situations in life to humble us. For me, marriage is certainly one, right? When you're living with someone, your spouse, and they get to see all sides of you, more than anyone else. It's easy to show up and do a podcast and give you the best 10% of Dave Neff versus I'm not always on, right? Or maybe I'm having a bad day, or maybe I react irritably to a situation. And so I think it's just kind of willing to know that you're going to make mistakes. And I think humility is also a lesson I've learned in terms of like trying to not take things so personally, whether at home or at work, and not getting defensive. I think getting defensive, we're can be pretty righteous creatures, and if we think we're in the right, we want to defend ourselves and that sort of thing. And so I think it's a lifelong journey with humility. But people are try to promote other people and allow other people to promote me if they so choose. I think we all know the people that are just constantly like self-promoting, and that kind of gets a little old after a while. But I mean, it's certainly, and I feel like as a city, Indianapolis is certainly a city that I think as I think about some of the civic leaders here, they're all marked by a strong degree of humility. And I don't know if that's the case at every other, major city. Some cities may actually look down on that.
For sure.
They want kind of the bravado and the.
Yeah.
But as I think about, people that have just left the mark here, Jim Morris comes to mind. I could go down the list of so many others that are just humble people that have had massive influence and reach, but have not been in it for their own ego.
Yeah. No, I think part of that comes from being in Indianapolis, because I think you can get a huge ego if your city's on the beach, or if you're like you have things that inherently give your city more attention. And I think like the Indianapolis 15 years ago is not the same as it is now. Just with how much we have grown and poured back into the city, but also how difficult it is to get people to stay. Because remember, you're born here, right?
Yeah, I was born and raised here. Moved away for like 6 years when I was young, but came back by third grade and grew up in Indy. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, born, raised, and educated here. And I grew up being told that I had to leave if I wanted to get anywhere in life. And I still have friends that are struggling with that. They're like, I want to move to the East Coast or the West Coast or the South. Like, just not, it's never Indianapolis.
Yeah.
And I've always asked myself why. And, part of why I started this platform was to hop on the fact and take advantage of the fact that this city is really hungry for people to stay.
Yeah.
And it's hungry for people to appreciate it for the opportunities that it gives. Like we have Butler, we have Purdue, we have Notre Dame, we have IU, we have Ball State. Like we have world-class education in the areas of healthcare, engineering, science, and business, all in the state.
Yeah.
But everybody gets that and they just dip out.
Yeah.
And it's crazy like how much the state like really provides for its citizens, but then how those citizens go and provide for other cities. So I 100% resonate with you in terms of like the humility that you do find here. Because you have to earn it. Because Indianapolis will humble you real quick. It's like, can I go do this? It's like, no, you have to make that. You have to create. It doesn't exist here. You have to go and start it on your own. And that comes with so many benefits, but it's hard. It's real hard. And
I definitely think this is a city where it's a meritocracy, right? If you're willing to put in the work, opportunities will open up to you, right? It's not maybe some other cities where it matters, your family's last name or, kind of who's your daddy sort of vibe down in the South. But
they don't care.
It's here. Here, I mean, if you're willing to roll up your sleeves and put yourself out there, raise your hand to volunteer for things, outside the day job, like opportunities will present itself to you. And we need leaders, and you're exactly right. I mean, we've got some world-class higher ed institutions in the state, and we're a net, importer when it comes to college for a lot of these schools. But to your point, a lot of that talent gets their degree and then they move back out of the state. And I think we got to do a better job at retaining that talent. And I think there's some efforts underway at a statewide level that I think a lot of times if those college students have a relationship or an internship or an apprenticeship with a company, let's say throughout the big companies, a Lilly, a Cummins, Elanco, then they're probably more likely to stick around, right, if that were to lead to a full-time job. But if they're just going to school, doing their internships out of state somewhere in the summers, then they're probably not gonna hang around. But I think having relationships, local relationships beyond sort of your college campus kind of makes a place sticky, right?
No. We spent a lot of this discussion talking about NIL. I think we've covered it a bunch, so I'm gonna sit that side through for a little bit. But I wanted to get more into you as a human being. So how you mentioned earlier, humility. The best definition you've heard of it, which I agree with, and us both being men of faith, humility is a huge part of how I operate, and I see it's a huge part of how you operate as well, and I appreciate that about you. You mentioned earlier that there's certain things that humble you in your life, like your marriage, right? So how, as you've grown in your career, working for all these different organizations, being a CEO, going out and raising money, trying new things, like how have you continued to show up in your own household, like for yourself? Like you have to show up for at least 3 different people now. Like for your wife, for yourself, and for your kids.
4 kids.
You have 4 kids. So hang on, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5. That's 6. That's 7 people you got to show up for at least every day, right? So just kind of walk me through just kind of the things that allow you to not have balance, but just show up as much as you can for each one.
I'm a firm believer that you've got to have strong personal disciplines, right? And for me, that looks like generally I try to be early to bed, early to rise, really my only quiet time, alone time, is in the mornings, right? Or maybe an hour after my kids go to bed. But like I said, I'm not a night owl, so so getting up early, not every day is 5 a.m., but I like to shoot for that. But and having some quiet time, doing a devotional, getting a sweat in, getting a workout in, maybe doing a little bit of work or check some emails and that sort of thing. But really starting my day that way, in a quiet house with a cup of coffee before things get rowdy. And then throughout the day, I think obviously we're attached to our smartphones these days, but I've been trying to if I get under like 3 hours of screen time in a day, I don't know if you ever go check the screen time.
I do, yeah.
Like that's a good day. That's just on the smartphone. Obviously, we're looking at our laptops, so I don't know if that factors that in. But there's a lot of days where it's more than that. But I can kind of feel that. I feel like right when I'm reaching for the phone, trying to get that dopamine rush to see if any new emails or texts or notifications came in. And so that's a constant work in progress of just I don't want to have that as a distraction. Right when I get home from work, I want to do the best that I can to be present with my 4 kids and with my wife, and that's looked like going out, throwing the baseball to my 3 and 4 year old, and they love it. They'd probably do it till they're blue in the face, but at some point you gotta, okay, let's go inside, let's get ready, get in the bath or whatever. So I think being present, and my kids notice it, like they're 9 down to 3, and so there's been a few times where like, hey Dad, get off your phone. That's always a bit of a convicting. I don't want them seeing me, just always on my phone around them, right? And so I really am trying to be mindful of just, how I show up around them, and that they're, sort of the most important thing when I'm in the room with them.
Yeah, apart from time commitment, of course. What changed the most for you when you had kids?
Yeah, I mean, my 30s, so I'm 40, so in my 30s is when I had all 4 of my kids. It's
you had all 4 of your kids in the span of 10 years?
Yeah, 6 years, yeah. But yeah. So, I feel like, each kid you add in the mix, you do get a little bit spread thinner, right? In terms of just, we're not superhuman, right? So you can only give, sometimes you're all together, sometimes you're trying to do one-on-one stuff. Because I think it's important as a father to build unique one-to-one relationships. Like not all my kids are the same, and they're also not mini-me's. As much as sometimes parents, we want them to be a mini-me, they're not. And so, I think what changed for me is like it's always a tension that you live in, right? Of like how much do I give to them versus work, and I don't view there's some sort of folks out there that say spend as much time with your family as possible, work as little as possible. Like I don't really subscribe to that. I think God designed work to be a good thing,
for
right?
Sure.
And we're called to create and build and hopefully create human flourishing through whatever our vocation is. And so I think it's okay that my kids might see me sacrificing, or maybe I do have an evening event, or I got to travel for work every now and then. But I also think it's important to model to them like I can be excited about work. And I'm somebody that's been fortunate in my nearly 20 years of work. Like most days I wake up excited to work. Like I'm not a weekend warrior. I'm not one of these people living for the weekends or dreading work. And there's a lot of people out there that are that way. So I think that's a huge blessing. And so I think it's important. Like I want my kids to see that work is a good thing. Depending on what line of work, like you want to be in your sweet spot, right? Jim Collins, Good to Great, talks about what's your hedgehog. The hedgehog principle is these 3 things. It's, what are you passionate about? What can you be world class at in terms of how are you genetically encoded? And then 3, what drives your economic engine? What can you get paid to do? What's the world willing to pay for? And I think that takes work for each of us, right? And it's different for each of us. But, to the degree that I can hopefully model that or impart some of that to my kids as they get older and start thinking, about careers and that sort of thing when they're still young. But, you want to do that.
Yeah. You mentioned finding your sweet spot. And I think for anybody listening, it's like, oh, Dave, that sounds great. But like, I'm doing this or I have this degree, or I'm doing that and third. So walk me through, you don't have to walk me through, but how did you find your sweet spot? Like what helped you? Like, were you ever at a point at first where you weren't happy with your work? And what sort of clicked to kind of have you make the transition of pursuing that? And of course, worked out.
Yeah.
You're here. So, but what was that like for you?
Yeah, I think your 20s, Byron, I mean, you're in this decade right now. It's all about learning, right? What are you good at? What are you not good at? What are those activities that give you life that you could do for hours on end, and it doesn't feel like work. Versus there's some activities in your day to day, I'm sure, that drain you or you procrastinate on, and those are. And then I think another good question to ask yourself is like, what is it that people come to me for, right? Like as you live a little bit more life, it's like, okay, like people always come to me about this or with this question. Like clearly they view me as somebody that has a good perspective on that, right? And I'm somebody that at the end of the day, like I've been fortunate to be with some great brands, some great organizations. Yeah, I've got the sports business thing. I've got sort of a mentoring, relational aspect of what I do. I care about the community, board chair of a school, Providence Cristo Rey, so I care about education and mentorship and opportunity. But my superpower is probably connectivity, right? And I'm somebody that's always been super intentional about relationships, building genuine relationships, showing curiosity. I think curiosity animates everything that I do. And so figuring out ways to partner up on certain initiatives, right? Whether it's partnerships on behalf when I was, as I've run Boilermaker Alliance the last couple of years, or when I ran Edge Mentoring, we were constantly partnering with individuals and companies. But how do you take that God-given gift of connectivity and use it to advance whatever the cause or organization is that you're leading, right? And obviously, like in terms of like hard skills, like I could sell. I've got marketing brains. I can think about how do we kind of position this from a messaging and positioning and branding sort of point of view. But at the end of the day, I want to be a doer and somebody that kind of can move the chains and not just somebody that talks about what they might do, but actually goes out and does it. And that's the mark of obviously an entrepreneur, right? You're willing to kind of wake up, take massive action. I read something recently where it was like entrepreneurs, if they think of something, they try to take action on it that day, not like in 2 weeks or something like that. So I'd say those are some of the things that have kind of helped me discern, what am I good at, what am I not good at. Yeah,
no, I would agree with you. And I think that's where I struggled being in my 20s. And I'm sure you dealt with this too, like you feel like you got to have it all figured out. Now I'm 26, halfway there. I'm like, I got 4 years, figure it out, see what I'm doing. But were you kind of in the same position where you were in like your mid, late 20s? Like, where do you think you like found your footing? Because I think everyone wants to find it so quick, myself included, to where you want to spend as little time as possible in like the stage where you're not happy, even though it informs you as to the direction you should go. People still want to spend as little time in it as possible. So do you think like you got a grasp of that early? It kind of took you a while to pick up on, like you mentioned, what do people come to me for? And then honestly, like monetizing that and making that a career and making that part of your work so that you are excited to go work every day. So when did you think you kind of got a grasp for what your gift was and started to move in the direction of making that the thing that you do?
Yeah, it was probably honestly more in like my mid-30s. Honestly, the 6 years leading Edge Mentoring was super clarifying. I mean, that was truly a startup, nonprofit, having to build something from scratch. So you've got to execute, daily in order to see progress, or other people out there doing the execution for you. And, just kind of in the pressure cooker of building an organization, hiring, firing, creating a scorecard of like what matters, what's moving the organization forward. I had a board of directors, right, that I was trying to learn how to lead and manage. And so, I think, but it's also a journey, Byron. I would caution against thinking you've arrived or you do know everything at 30. I know that's not what you meant, but like at the same time, like it's a journey, and I think I'm hopefully learning and reinventing myself at 40, and I want to be doing that at 50 as well, not just kind of set in my ways and kind of hardened cement, like, okay, this is what works, this doesn't work, right? I think you got to kind of keep a sense of, like I said earlier, curiosity and wonder around, hey, like I had a pretty strong point of view that this is how this worked, but maybe keep an open mind that maybe there's a different path, right? And so I think being just open, being adaptable, reinventing yourself, spending time around a diverse group of folks, right, that see the world and experience the world differently. Right? I think it's easy to kind of get into bubbles and echo chambers of people that think just like you.
For sure.
And for me, I think being intentional with that proximity of who my friends are and who I surround myself with, and I also want to raise my kids that way, get them exposure to places and people that are just quite frankly, different, right, than how we might normally roll. But it all comes down. I mean, we got the same 24 hours in a given day. And so how do you spend those, and how do you leverage those to just continually be a lifelong learner?
Yeah. Do you think you ever got to a point where you thought you arrived, and what snapped you out of it? Because to your point, and trust me, I'm not trying to have it all figured out at 30. I know I'm not gonna. Now, it would be like I would like to be in a better position in 4 years. Like you mentioned, your 20s is all about figuring it out, and I'm doing a lot of different things right now, like coaching, content, consultant. Like I'm trying to figure it out in the moment. Trying to give myself grace, like we talked about earlier, like really being patient with yourself. But no, I've been humbled in certain points in my life where I thought I had it like figured out, and honestly, serving the God that we serve, He will let you know that you don't, to snap you out of it, because that's what's best for you. But did you ever get to a point where you thought you arrived, and what snapped you out of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes when you might be in your sweet spot and you're getting a lot of affirmation or kudos that you're really good at this or really good at that, like that could be a bit seductive, right?
Yeah.
Because everyone's like, man, like you're killing it, like this is what you're born to do. And I think if we're not careful, we could start to sort of believe the hype, right?
Yeah.
And I had a wise mentor when I was leading Edge just tell me, Dave, you need to be waking up every day running to the foot of the cross, not literally, right, but just like saying, God, I need you to show up. I think I'm really good at this, but like without you, like I know I can't do any of it, right? And so kind of equip me to see success in this way, or just be able to kind of move the needle in the ways that, again, I think when you figure out what your talents are and you're good at, it's just easy to kind of squeeze out any need for God, right?
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like, hey, like I got this, versus like keeping a humble posture and saying, no, I need you to show up, because without you, like this could all fall apart, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, have I had moments where I probably think I got this figured out, I'm hot stuff, people are coming to me for this, but again, I think it's a journey just to stay humble, to stay grounded. I think it's also a danger if you think you're not humble, or if you think you're not prideful.
Yeah.
Which I've had some. Man, I think I'm a pretty humble guy, especially compared to this guy. You know what I mean? It's easy to sort of play that comparison game. But if you think you're not prideful, that's probably a good indication. Like there's probably some blind spots, right? That you really kind of need to maybe talk to a close friend, a spouse, like, hey, how do I show up in this setting, right? And kind of get some of that 360 feedback.
Trust me, I know exactly what you're talking about. Funny enough, like being a college athlete, I was like, I appreciate the invitation to talk about your faith. I'll do it all day, but I try to like let people tell me about it first. But no, I grew up a man of faith for sure. I grew up in the church, and when I got to Purdue and I saw some of these crazy fools, I was like, I am the man, because they're so much worse than me. But no, that was my pride coming out, and I got humbled hard, like really, really hard, to the point that's where I snapped out of it. Like that's honestly for me personally where I really dug into my faith, and I have not left God since, because I refuse to. But you brought it up quite a few times, just the role that your faith has played in your journey of not just finding yourself, but recognizing your gift and then turning that gift into your work, but then also having that and representing how you work on that gift that you've been given, and letting your kids and your family see that too. So I would really love to know, and I'm not sure like how you grew up from a faith perspective, but where do you think you really found your footing and beginning to include God in this journey that you've been on?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my faith is something, Byron, that I was raised in a home where church was a regular part of our lives. And I do, some people will say, oh, we went to church, but there was no personal relationship. No, I was definitely raised in a home where we were taught like it's important to have a personal relationship, right, with Jesus Christ. And when you're a kid, you kind of have an idea of what that is, and as you get older, you can either make your faith your own, or just do what your parents tell you, right? And I think I was fortunate. I had to deal with some, by and large, grew up in a loving home, but I had some challenges like we all do. And when I was 15, I got diagnosed with Crohn's disease. So Crohn's is something that I've lived with for 25 years now, but it was sort of a challenging period, right, where I was having a bunch of health issues, lost a bunch of weight. I'm in high school, and you're kind of a little bit like a little angry with God, like, hey, God, like, why, all my friends can kind of eat, drink, whatever they want, and here I am, like, just dealing with some gut issues. And so, but I remember praying, like, hey, I'd love to be healed of this, God. It was sort of like Paul talks about the thorn in his side. It was kind of like that for me. But as I reflect now, 25 years into living with it, I wouldn't be who I am today without it, right? Like, I feel like that health challenge that I've had to navigate, and it's been, it ebbs and flows. Like, it's in a really good spot right now, and I'm on some medicine for it. But, that was something where I think it tested my faith, right? Like, either do I really believe what I say I believe? And I, through it all, I feel like God was with me, still is. And I think as you live a little bit more life, like in your 20s, it could kind of feel like everything's up and to the right? But then you start to live a little bit of life, and we're all going to deal with some dark clouds, right? We're all going to deal with some things that you might cause, some things you may not cause, right? And I think the real test will be, how do you respond in those moments, right? And I could certainly say that my faith has been tested and even in recent times, right? Just with some challenging things that have come along, and it's like, okay, God, do I really believe what I say? And I got to go back to Scripture and lean on some close friends and my spouse and hopefully a mentor or somebody that's discipling me. I got an older guy in my life right now I try to meet with once a month, where I can just be super open and vulnerable about struggles as well as good things going on. But I think also as you get older, it's easy to you start to squeeze out people that speak truth to you, right? Because you got an image, right? Or people view you a certain way, like professionally, and you don't want to show any signs of weakness. And I get that temptation as well. But having a few close, trusted friends that you give complete and utter permission to speak into your life, and hopefully vice versa, right? Because those are the guys that can kind of check you, right? When they see, like, hey, I've been noticing, like, your language or the things you're talking about, or these sorts of things that it's like, okay, like, I appreciate that. You may not like to hear it, but it's good, because I think isolation's the worst thing, and obviously it gets a lot of pub right now, just with screens and social media, and people just aren't together as much. And so we talked a lot about isolation at Edge, and how statistically people have way less close friends than they did 20 years ago, right? And so I think I could speak to that. As men get older, specifically, you show me a man that's north of 35 with 3 kids, it's like the first thing to go is male friendships, right? Because you got a lot of things on your plate. You got work, you got your wife, your kids, trying to take care of yourself. And so just being intentional to create spaces for friendships is something that's huge.
Yeah, no, one, I appreciate you telling your story. And you said you wanted to take that part out?
Oh, no, we're good to keep that in. I just said I had like 5 minutes.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
Beautiful story, man.
Yeah.
And that could be a whole different conversation. But no, I really, really resonate with what you said about friendships, especially male friendships. I think especially, and I was having this conversation the other day, of when you are going seemingly different directions, even your closest friends, like sometimes you kind of can't keep them around because they're going in a direction you're not going. And you can't necessarily like trust them to be honest with you. You can't like always take advice from them. It's like, I love you and you're my boy, but it's like, I'm not sure like I would like trust you to get me through this time of my life, and that's okay. But it also just results in you having a little bit less friends. And I think the beauty of being a person of faith is that you are never alone ultimately, but also trusting that the people that are going to be brought into your life are the people that are supposed to be there. Now it's up to us whether we become and get vulnerable and comfortable with them and can take their feedback. I'm honestly still like struggling. Like, I don't want to just blatantly tell my friends like, hey, stop being stupid. Like, stop being stupid, because you want to keep those friendships. But ultimately, like the ones that you can be like that around are the ones that are going to stay long term. But no, amazing conversation, Dave. I appreciate you coming on. Just real quick, what's next for you?
No breaking news yet. Just having a lot of really good conversations right now. I'm excited. It's like I said, I'm at a being 40 years, kind of thinking about, okay, what's the next 10 years look like, right? And hopefully it's something that I see myself kind of growing in and being there for a while. I've knew this sort of had a shelf life to it when I signed up, but we'll stay tuned, I guess I'll say. So
no, trust me, I'll stay tuned. I'm excited for you. I appreciate you coming on. Once again, this is the FBA podcast. Thank you to anybody listening that's tuned in. But once again, Dave Neff, appreciate you coming on, man.
Thanks, Byron.
Yes, sir.
Good stuff, man.
Always in my shows with the dab.
Yeah. All right. Love it, bro. Oh, man. Thank you. Yeah. You bet. Sorry to speed things up.
No, all good. It was still